Hey there! Are you having trouble getting your buttercream cakes to look smooth and glossy? Or is that top corner giving you trouble? No worries. Today I'll walk you through things step by step and show you everything that I do that makes this process a lot easier. And then with a little practice, your cakes will be looking super too. So let's talk about the cake, the tools, and the buttercream.
As you're filling and stacking your layers, be sure that your layers are aligned super well. Look at the top two layers on the left here, they're sticking out slightly, and I'll show you at the end of this video why it's really important to stack your layers super straight and not have any of them tilting or jutting out. Additionally, never try to frost a warm cake, and give your filling and crumb coat a little bit of time to chill before you do your final layer of buttercream frosting.
The main thing that messes up your smooth finish is the difference in temperature between your cake and your buttercream. You want this cake not to be fresh out of the freezer or fridge. So if you just pulled out your layers from the freezer and stacked the cake, give it a minute to come closer to room temperature before you start frosting.
To clarify, the fillings of your cake should be properly chilled so your layers don't shift, but letting the cake sit a moment at room temperature lets the surface of the cake come closer to room temperature.
Because for the frosting, you want your frosting to actually be warmed slightly. Frosting I'm using today is going to be either a Swiss meringue buttercream or a Swiss American hybrid. So for this method, those are going to be the two ideal types of buttercream.
Moving on to the buttercream, take a look at the texture. It's very loose. Before I transferred it to this metal bowl, I microwaved it for 5 to 10 seconds at a time, mixing in between to knock out air bubbles and get a super loose consistency.
When you're stirring your buttercream, before you even put it on the cake, don't do a lot of folding when you're mixing. That incorporates more air into it, so just do back and forth motions.
More air means more bubbles, which is what you want to avoid when you're frosting your cake.
Next, we need to talk about how are you going to apply your buttercream to your cake. There's two popular methods. You can scoop and plop, or you can bag up a piping bag and pipe an even layer of buttercream across the surface of your entire cake. Do whichever you're more comfortable with, and also which one you can do more quickly. Your main battle is against time. You want to get the buttercream on the cake and start smoothing it as quickly as possible before your buttercream has time to get too cold or chilled, because that's what causes the texture. So pick one of those methods, and there's no wrong answer, just what you're most comfortable with. Now let's talk about the tools you're going to be using. I like to have a big spatula on hand for scooping. And then for actually smoothing the buttercream out, I like to use the larger angled palette knife. You don't want to use the smaller one because you actually have to do more work and you cover less surface area as you're smoothing, which in turn makes it take longer. But to do the final smoothing on your cake, you're going to also need a cake scraper. You have several options. Primarily, you need to pick something that's the right size for your cake. So if you're using a tall cake, you're gonna want a tall scraper. Let's talk about the difference between these two scrapers. So both of them have a right angle and a flat edge. One of these, you'll have it forever. While the bowl scooping side of this cake scraper is really handy. These are made of plastic, so over time, if they go through the washer, they will show signs of wear and tear. So if you have a plastic one, always check it to be sure it still needs to be a straight up and down line. Sometimes just based on the nature of them getting heated when washed or the way that you hold them, like if you grip them tightly, they bend. But when you're just trying to get a smooth, flat finish on your cake, that's not ideal. Also, if they get nicks or notches in the smoothing edge, it'll cause like a horizontal line around the whole cake. Also not great. So these are great. This is fine to practice with. I love them. But if you just want to buy one tool and stick with it forever, I would go ahead and just get a metal one. Next, let's talk about how you're going to hold your scraper. I like to fan out my fingers like this, just so I'm applying even pressure. You don't want to like clamp up and just hold it from down here. You're more prone to tilt and like wobble if you're holding it like too bunched up like this. It's really easy without noticing it to be holding your cake scraper and be tilting it either in too close to your cake or out away from your cake. You might not notice it while you're scraping your cake down, but if you step back away from your cake, sometimes you'll get what we call a top hat. This is what we used to call it at a bakery I worked at. We would call it a top hat. If you're holding your scraper too far away at the top, your cake is going to go out like this. Like the buttercream will look smooth, but your cake will have a subtle fanning out at the top. And then the other way around, if you're holding it too close at the top and kind of tilting out at the bottom, you get a volcano. Always keep your scraper straight up and down, and sometimes you might need to move your head around to be sure that like you're holding it straight up. If you're standing next to your cake, above your cake looking down, sometimes it's hard to see that angle. When you're first getting used to the feel of how to hold it, it might help you to crouch down and get on eye level with your cake to be sure that you're holding it straight up and down. For the bag method of covering your cake, you can use one of these. It's a flat, broad tip, and it's really helpful for covering your cakes quickly, or what more people most likely have in their piping tip arsenal is this, just a regular round flat tip. This is the one I'm going to use today to show you how I do it. So we're going to fill our bag with frosting, and we'll start at the bottom of the cake and move up. And when you're filling the bag, be sure that you're really pressing the frosting down in there. You want as few bubbles as possible. And for good control, you never want to fill your bag more than 2/3 of the way full. If you fill it too close to the top, it's harder to control the pressure that you're applying when squeezing. Twist it nice and tight, and then starting at the base, we're just going to work our way up. Try to hold your tip at the same distance from the cake. So I'm holding it about 1/4 inch from the surface of the cake, and then I'm just going to pipe layers all the way around the cake, moving towards the top. And as you're going around, at the gap between the layers, if it's not fully filled with buttercream, you may have to add extra buttercream so that everything is the same thickness. Typically, depending on the size of your bag, you will have to refill in the middle. This kind of factors into how long does it take you to get the buttercream onto the surface of your cake. Whichever one you feel more comfortable with and whichever one you can do more quickly is going to be your best option. For the top of the cake, your bag runs out and you haven't quite made it to the tippy top of your cake. That's okay. Some of the buttercream that you place on the top of your cake can be folded over to the sides. So I have a gap right here, but I'm not worried because I'm about to plop the buttercream on top, like so. And for this 3-layer 6-inch cake, I believe I used about 1 pound and 12 ounces of buttercream. I may have a little extra, but it's better to have more than less when you're practicing especially. You don't want to be running out and having gaps in your buttercream or be scraping the bowl trying to finish covering your cake. So I'll roughly start flattening out the top and then working down the sides. Initially, if you do some vertical swipes, and that'll blend the seams between the lines that you piped. All right, now for starters, be sure that you rest your scraper flat on the board and then spread your fingers out to apply even pressure to the side of the cake. At this stage, I don't need to worry about making the pass around the cake in one go. Right now, I'm just starting out. This isn't my final scraping, so I'm not worried if there's seams. This is just me starting the smoothing process out to see where there are gaps where I need to redistribute the buttercream. So you can see right here, instead of continuing to smooth and think, oh, well, I'll just scrape the buttercream down till it's all at that level, I'm going to go ahead where I see these gaps and bubbles and start adding the buttercream back. Take a little extra buttercream and dab it over the surface here, here, and anywhere that you see those little windows. And then we need to address the top corner. If you look at the top corner now, it's very round and droopy and not sharp at all. But you'll notice here and also here, there's quite a dip from the top edge of the cake to where this side buttercream meets. Those are the areas where you want to go ahead before you go through a lot of smoothing and go ahead and build up those layers with more buttercream. But that's a big part of the process of smoothing your buttercream cake, is noticing the imperfections as you're getting started and addressing them as they go along instead of trying to get, well, oh, I'll get the sides nice and smooth and then I'll fix the top later. Try to go ahead and fill in where the buttercream is lacking along the way. All right, now swapping back to the scraper, I'm going to start on the top, smoothing this out, and I'm going to use this extra to fill in the gap on the side as well. on this top corner. So can you tell the difference between this section of the cake and then this section of cake? There's plenty of extra buttercream where the two sides, or where the top and the side of the cake meets. So there's not going to be any gaps as we finish smoothing the sides and the top. There's a certain stage in the process where you'll be going back and forth from the top to the sides, and fold it over the edge like that. Okay, now let's go back to the sides and start smoothing the sides again. So you can already tell, you'll notice that it's looking much more like a corner now. Earlier it was looking like a smooth slope on the top corner of the buttercream, which is not what we want. We want a nice right angle up at the top as well. And I'm just going around, continuously spinning it. Again, I'm not worried about that last seam or anything yet.
Check out that top line of buttercream. That's where my scraper isn't tall enough to meet the edge of the cake since we added more buttercream on top. So this is a good sign you need to swap to a taller scraper.
And any section where you see that there's a deep groove between this lifted edge of the buttercream that's coming from the side of the cake and the top edge of the buttercream, you're going to want to add a little buttercream now, and that'll help you finish this off smoothly. So I'm going to just gently blend that gap, basically, where the two pieces meet. And there are two different ways to finish your top edge. I'll show you both of them, and again, you can pick which works best for you. And I'm very lightly pressing, hardly at all. Like that. And yeah, that's about as good as it's gonna get. It's smooth almost all the way around except for this one seam. That is where I lifted the scraper off.
So once your cake is to this stage where the buttercream looks mostly smooth and there's only a few spots here and there like small bubbles, you need to start focusing on making your passes around the outside of the cake with the scraper in one fluid motion. So if you grab the turntable and turn it a little bit and then grab it again, turn it a little bit more, and it takes you maybe 4 pulls of the table to get all the way around the cake, you'll have 4 different vertical seams that are visible on the side of the cake. You can kind of see one now where the camera's at on the right side of the cake. But if you grab the turntable far away from yourself, pull it towards yourself, and have your hand push it past your body and all the way around so that you're making one fluid motion around the cake with the scraper, you'll only have 1 vertical seam. It should be that your cake scraper starts and then stops in the same place. Additionally, at this stage, you don't need to be pressing on the scraper quite as firmly. You can be a little more gentle as you're scraping across the surface of the buttercream here.
All right, and now to finish this top edge, hold like this. Very lightly, try to keep it at a parallel with the top of the cake, and then holding it just past the edge, then pull across toward yourself, barely any pressure at all, and swipe down like that. And work your way around the top. Additionally, you can do it with an offset spatula, and you can push away from yourself by holding it flat with the top of the cake. And
so for this part, you have the edge of the spatula hovering just over the top of the cake, and then you're pushing away from yourself, but at the last minute of each pushing stroke, you lift slightly to pull the buttercream away from the top of the cake. Just that little bit of excess buttercream gets just gently scooped off of the top of the cake. Also, at this stage, once you get these blobs of buttercream removed, think about what kind of cake you're making, because if this is where your top border is going to go, you would cover up these little imperfections and not even have to spend the additional time smoothing them out. So always think about your design. But if this part of your cake is going to be visible, follow through the next few steps so that you can get a really crisp finish.
And you see this area right here, that's where the cake is poking through, where that top layer was mispositioned, misaligned a little bit. That is where the cake is poking out slightly here. So be sure that each of your cake layers is aligned with the next one before you begin frosting it all. There is a slight lift on the very edge of part of the buttercream. This is where you stop and put your cake in the refrigerator, and then I'll show you how you come back and get rid of that last little imperfection on the top of the cake. Now for this last part of the cake, you can use either your plastic or your metal scraper to finish the top lip of the cake and get a nice sharp corner. The cake has been chilling for at least half an hour so that the top is really firm. So there's two ways to approach this. If you use the metal scraper, you can press straight down like this and level off that top edge. If you use the plastic scraper, you're going to want to do it holding it perpendicular to the cake and scooping it off the top. I'm going to use the metal scraper, and I'm just going to go along the edge. And here, if I hold it this way, you can see the top layer getting scraped off like that. You see a little bit? But yeah, so normally I turn it the other way. That was just as an example, but normally I turn it towards myself. So here we go. And just holding it to the cake, the top layer of frosting is nice and chilled, and I am scraping off the top corner like so. It has to be really cold or else it'll come off in like little chunks instead of being nice and smooth like that. So, and then for right here, I can show you with the plastic scraper. It's a different, since the edge is beveled instead of just like straight down like the metal one, you kind of scoop off the top. So same goal, just to scoop that lifted edge down to where it's level with the rest of the cake, but a different approach. This one you're kind of scraping this way, and the metal one you are scraping flat like this. Both have their challenges. If you are tilting too much, you'll dip the pointed corner of your metal scraper into the top and like add, you know, texture here or there. I think actually I can show you. I held it weird here and you can see a little scrape. So make sure you're just holding it really level with the top of your cake. And same thing with this one. If you're holding it straight, there's no problem. But if you accidentally start pressing down too hard, you can like gouge and scoop lower than is necessary. You really just want to keep it level with the rest of the buttercream on top of the cake. So the buttercream is really nice and cold, so it's coming off and leaving a smooth finish on top. So if you look at the top, it looks pretty level. There is a little bit of a difference here between the center of the cake and the outer edge of the cake. I'll keep scraping and see if I can level it entirely, but ultimately the depth is consistent all the way across the cake, and the corners look really nice and sharp. There's a couple crumbs of frosting that are like hanging off the edge. You can just very lightly with your fingertip or the edge of the spatula kind of swipe those away so that they aren't lifted off of the edge. And yeah, and as long as the cake is really cold, you can keep scraping down the top until it is nice and level all the way across the top. If there are any gaps, you can go back with a tiny touch of buttercream, smooth it out, and then use like a tiny scraper to, so like so, just add a tiny touch, and then with a really steady hand, use either your plastic scraper or a small scraper like this, and then brush off the excess. Hopefully you'll be filling the gap without creating a new blemish on top of the cake. So, and also at this time, it's kind of like choose your battles. But yeah, thanks for checking out Cakes by You. I hope this helps. Leave any comments below and I'll try to help you troubleshoot things. And then otherwise, I wish you sharp corners and smooth buttercream.
Additionally, I stream every Sunday and Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. If you want to ask me a question live on Twitch, check it out.